I'm gonna build you a house. Right here. Our house.
This came to me through the producers. They approached me and they showed me first a trailer for Nancy Bursky's documentary, and then the documentary itself. And the truth is, I wasn't aware of the loving story, and I was kind of ashamed of that fact. You know, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I went to Little Rock Central High, the site of the desegregation crisis in '57. I felt like I had a pretty solid knowledge of kind of our history through the civil rights movement, and I didn't know anything about this story. And so that was the first thing that struck me. And then as I started to look at the documentary itself, you start to see Richard and Mildred so beautifully portrayed through that archival footage. And I just immediately started having touch points with so many things in their story and in their life and in their personalities. But that's how it came to me, you know. The anecdote that I keep telling is I was traveling when they first sent me the link to the doc, and I sent that to my wife. And I said, you know, they're talking to me about maybe turning this into a narrative film. What do you think? And she just emailed me back, if you don't make this, I'll divorce you. So that made it a pretty easy choice.
I'm gonna take Mildred up to D.C. to get married.
Are you sure about that?
By the power vested in me by the District of Columbia, I now pronounce you husband and wife.
This film follows this couple who make the decision to get married. And at the time, in 1958 in Virginia, that was against the law. Interracial marriage was against the law. They were arrested, jailed, and subsequently exiled from the state for 25 years. And really, the film follows their journey to get back home.
In here?
Richard!
What you doing in bed with that woman?
I'm his wife.
That's no good here.
In 1963, Mildred Loving was watching the civil rights marches in D.C. And from a conversation inspired by her cousin, she wrote a letter to Bobby Kennedy explaining her situation. Well, that led the ACLU to find out about their case, and that was the spark that started this journey of Loving versus State of Virginia all the way to the Supreme Court.
Richard Perry Loving being a white person and Mildred Jeter being a colored person did unlawfully cohabitate as man and wife.
Richard?
That ain't right!
When I write, I usually write with actors in mind. You know, I made this film called Mud, and I wrote that specifically for Matthew McConaughey. Well, in this case, I was writing it specifically for the real Richard and Mildred. I had all of this archival footage. That's what I was looking at. So it was really important for me, number one, to find people that physically resembled these people, but also people that had their essence, you know. And as I was working with Joel on Midnight Special, I started to think, well, if he lost a little weight and dyed his hair blonde and we put, you know, some bad teeth in, he'd be pretty darn close. And I knew he had this amazing facility for voice, as well as posture and body language and everything else. And I knew we had enough reference material for Richard that he would be able to pull that off.
That could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
We ain't hurting anybody.
The state of Virginia will argue that it is unfair to bring children of mixed race into the world.
Tell that woman to come out here.
Ruth was the very first person we auditioned. She walked in the room. She was nervous, and I get really nervous when the actors are nervous in auditions. I want them to do really well. So we didn't talk a lot. She just kind of jumped right in. And you know, her posture changed, her mouth changed, and out came this voice. And Ruth had obviously been doing what I was doing, which was poring over this archival footage and studying, you know, Mildred. And she really became Mildred right in front of our eyes. And it wasn't until afterward, you know, kind of we relaxed and I started talking to her. I was like, oh, you're Irish. That's bizarre. You know, I really, it wasn't a calculated move to cast someone not from the United States. It was really, she just she just reminded us of Mildred. And as we were going through looking for financing, anytime anybody would ask, well, who's Ruth Negga? I would just show them this QuickTime video of that audition, and I'd say, well, she's Mildred Loving.
You realize this case could alter the Constitution of the United States.
You think you'll lose?
We may lose the small battles, but win the big war.
Loving is a film about humanity. It's a film about the love in the truest sense. You know, to tell somebody I love them, that's actually pretty easy. To be committed to someone for life is much, much harder. You know, I've been married for 7 years now, and I know that marriage isn't always easy. It's something that you have to work at, and it's something you have to commit to. And what's so beautiful about Richard and Mildred is they were confronted with more difficulties than most. And despite the fact that multiple times they were offered a way out in terms of just divorce her, and this can all be over. You guys can go back to living the way that you were living. But that wasn't good enough for them. And the commitment that they held on to over the course of all these trials and tribulations, I don't know, it speaks to love in kind of the truest sense, in my opinion.